Good evening, Jim.
Hello.
Evening, Laura.
Hi, Dale.
Rajiv, how are you?
Okay.
Alderman Meyer.
Hi, Dale. How you doing?
Not too bad, hanging in there.
Hi, Dale. How are you?
Ah, there's Dale. Okay, let's see if we can get this thing to turn around and work here. There we go. Are we seeing now a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. And everything's working. This should be slowly streamed to YouTube as well. So everything that we are doing is now being recorded. Oh, I should probably hit recording on here too. And where's the button? Come on, button. There's meeting controls.
If this is Zoom, you probably have to take it out of screen sharing in order to get to the controls you need.
Yeah. Let's hit record. Record to the cloud. There we go. Have you been using this a lot over at St. Mary's?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. Been keeping me busy too because you know, the teachers have their work laptops at home, and when there's an issue, of course, I have to go get them, take them, either bring them home or take them to school, repair whatever the problem is. Yesterday we had a teacher, actually Friday, we had a teacher break a headphone jack off into in the laptop there. So that was an interesting set of YouTube videos that I had to follow to figure out how to get that jack out of there.
Yeah, it's just like one thing after another. That
Yep.
My favorite is having to try to troubleshoot people's home equipment because, well, we don't have enough stuff. We're working from home, and I was dealing with the YouTube stuff this morning where people were not getting connections and the microphones weren't working, and it's just like one thing after another. Then teaching them the tool on top of everything else.
Right. We went from you know, how does this work to now people complaining about the quality of the cameras and their laptops. So they made that leap.
We actually did 4 interviews today, this afternoon. First time that HR was hosting a whole series of interviews where all the interviews now are actually being done via teleconference. So I feel in many ways that we are slowly breaking ourselves out of the Stone Age around here and finally joining what everyone else is doing. But it is a huge culture shift, just absolutely huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now that people are beginning to use these digital meeting capabilities more regularly and for longer periods of time, we're starting to see now reports of what they call Zoom fatigue. So there's a whole psychological aspect to trying to run meetings and attend meetings digitally versus in person.
Yeah, there's that, and then also it becomes a ball and chain.
Mm-hmm.
Where just because now that you can do things digitally, which means now you're available 24/7. We had a very interesting finance committee meeting last night, and we actually had the audio bridge, so the general public, which they forgot to publish today on the meeting agenda. It's like, all right, the general public is supposed to be able to participate, but no one put the audio bridge number, which is different than the Zoom number. We use Avast just to keep the general public out of the Zoom room to prevent Zoom bombing off of it. That next thing you know, this is the first time they really started using audio bridges for meetings in addition to turning around and using Zoom. They've been using that more than often. And next thing you know, you have all these people who normally would not participate in a finance committee meeting, now suddenly on the audio bridge doing it just because it's convenient to do it from their house. So I see it actually being a good thing, but it's beginning to change now the culture of the meetings. And normally you had to come down to City Hall to participate in stuff, and you weren't allowed to turn around and do teleconferencing and audio bridging. And now that's dramatically changing. Whether it maintains itself after COVID is another story, but we'll soon see. Let's see, what time is it here? I have it 6:59 on my watch, but I think my watch is off.
5:59.
Or 5:59, thank you.
So
My watch has a big old crack down the middle of it, so much for a Fitbit.
it's probably
We got
lost a couple of minutes then. 6:02.
6:02, yeah.
Okay, we got Rajiv, John, Laura, Dale. Who else are we waiting for? Our chair and vice chair.
Scott's here.
Scott's here.
Oh, there he is. Let's see, John. All right. The only one I think is Greg here.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I only get 4 people side around my poor little laptop screen here. So there may be more people on that's actually listing than what I have as display
You
icons.
go to the top of the participant screen,
Yeah.
Jim. You can click on the little grid there, and it'll give you a size of a resizable
I'll stop
screen
sharing.
for the, all of the participants. You can do that while you're sharing, as long as you have the screen real estate.
That's the problem. Is this is on a 15-inch laptop.
Well, it says there's 8 people here.
Yep,
so-
I think we got everybody here. So I'm not going to turn around and take roll. Scott Mead,
Present.
Greg Stroig,
Present.
Alderman Dan Mayer,
Here, present.
Dale Webler,
Present.
Laura Galusha,
Present.
Rajiv Sarana,
Present.
and John Farney.
Present.
Okay, we now have a quorum. Okay,
right,
so
do we have a-
comment
do we have
period
any
we won't
citizens?
have.
Do you have any citizens calling into the line, Jim?
No, because they didn't publish it out.
Okay, I missed that first part. That's what I thought you were saying, but, all right. All right, so we'll move on to item 3. Review and approval of the March 4th minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
Move a second.
This is Greg, I second.
All in favor of approving the minutes as stated?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
Okay.
Item 4, the email spam and malware filter project.
And now we will go back to screen sharing. Okay, Franklin has been actually on semantic-email-security.cloud. You probably remember this. It was like one of the earlier things I did actually becoming a wood director here on City of Franklin, realizing we had no spam filtering service beyond what they were getting in through the shareware version of Firewall that we had. We decided to go with semantic email security.cloud at the time because per the Gartner study, it was a recognized email security vendor out there. We knew that email was a major point of penetration. We weren't really addressing it very well. At the time, it was a completely unfunded project, so it was a low-cost solution. So when we looked at the various options that were out there, this was actually number 2 in the cost structure. And we knew that it was going to be fairly easy to implement because it was actually a cloud-based solution. There was no on-premise equipment whatsoever that we had to turn around and do. It has some fairly decent tracing capabilities. So if a person questions why something was quarantined or not quarantined, I can actually get some pretty decent traces over it. Anything that gets overly difficult, I have to turn around and actually open up a ticket with semantic on it. It's got really fairly decent detection and prevention. There's not much that has gone through. Now, knock on wood, we have not had the malware problems and ransomware problems that I've seen in other communities very close to us, where ransomware has been a problem. It could be just we're not a target, or we're doing things slightly different than they are at this point. But I think some of it has to do with, yeah, we actually got a pretty good product out here that we've been using for a good period of time. And when we first put this in, no one thought we had a spam problem. Is it spam? No, I don't get spam at all. Now they see that, yep, 50% of what we get now is spam through the reports. And they see a very strong value in the actual solution where it is stopping a heck of a lot out there. And I think there's a good understanding culturally amongst the entire city that, yeah, email-borne viruses, malware, and phishing attacks is very, very serious. And it is something to take into a lot of consideration when we look at the protection. Yeah, maybe it's quarantining your newsletters every day and you have to go and unquarantine your newsletters. But overall, I'm not seeing resistance at all from people. They like the product thus far, and they do see value in a cloud-based spamming solution. The problem is Symantec has been sold to Broadcom. I don't know why a chip manufacturer wants a software company, but they made the purchase for it. They bought everything of Symantec enterprise licensing, and anything that is home commodity, that's a different portion of Symantec. They didn't buy that. That's still true in Blue Symantec. So if you're using it at home, they haven't bought that. But even Symantec antivirus enterprise version of it, that's now all the property of Broadcom. Now the problem is Broadcom, in their pathing of what they want to do with this acquisition, has pretty much spelled out this is where our road path is going to be for our products, and email security is not part of that road path. That Symantec technically does not own Semantic Email Security.cloud, even though their name is on it. It's owned by Message Labs, and they're basically just turning around and rebranding another person's product that they have. To me, it looks like Broadcom is going to turn around and take this piece of the acquisition and eventually let it go, or just not care and feed it, get as much milk out of the cow as they possibly can, and then just turn around and eventually let it die, or let people turn around and migrate to other sources. There have been some problems. I cannot get any additional licenses, even though we have new employees right now. I have 265 licenses. I'm running about 270 employees right now, and I can't get any more. They will not sell any more licenses. It got to be such a big problem. We buy all of our licenses for Symantec through CDW, which is their largest licensing provider. Symantec has now dropped them entirely as a vendor because of all the customer complaints and basically complaints of being completely and totally non-responsive on it. So we know this product is going to be coming up for renewal. I think it's June or July that it comes up for renewal. I think it's a real good question of how am I going to turn around and renew it? If I can't renew it from CDW, I'm going to have to go to a different licensing provider in order to turn around and do it. And even if I renew it, are they going to turn around and carry it through my entire renewal subscription? Or are they just going to flat out going to turn around and kill this product off on us and then really let us hanging? Even though it's been a great product, it's been a great workhorse for us, I think there's a lot of risk right now staying with Broadcom at this point, knowing there's a very significant chance that, yep, they may kill it, and then I have days or weeks to figure out how I'm going to turn around and convert everything over to another provider. So that leaves us with a very non-glorified choice of, all right, we're going to have to turn around and switch to somebody else as an email security provider. When I look at it, I'm following basically the same roadmap that I did back in 2016 of, all right, who's in Gartner Quadrant 1, who has a really good reputation out there of being a great email security provider because it is the #1 point in penetration in most organizations. And two of the names you probably are not surprised at all, Proofpoint, which is the big giant out there right now, Mimecast, which actually started up from Microsoft employees who started their own company. We looked at those back in 2016 as an option, but they were a little on the pricey side. And then there's a new one out there, Email Laundry. It's fairly new to the United States, but it's got a really, really strong reputation in EU. And in the EU, it's actually the largest email spam provider that they have out there. My recommended solution, as we briefly look at these proposals, you should have received PDFs of all the details of the quotes on it, is Proofpoint. Proofpoint, again, it's the big one out there. We kind of wanted it back in 2016, but we couldn't afford it. We actually can get this through HBS. That HBS does a lot of Proofpoint implementations for customers. It's probably one of their biggest projects that they actually do. The total cost is $5,472 plus $25 for implementation. That's a little bit above what we're paying right now, but right now we have 260, actually I have 260, it's 265 licenses that we have currently. We're going up another 20 to 285 licenses for it. The other big nice thing with Proofpoint that the other one doesn't have is it includes 30 days email spooling service, that if we had a situation like the city of Racine did, and we got hacked with ransomware and everything came to a crashing halt and we didn't have any exchange, people could at least log on to Proofpoint and look at their last 30 days worth of email, and they can see their incoming email. Yes, it's not their full inbox, it's not everything, but most of the time, 30 days is a pretty good amount of what you need to do to get you through over the hump. Most of the people don't have that long of a period of time for spooling services. And HBS also uses this internally, that they dog fooded this very well on it. They use it constantly. They're very familiar with it. So if we run into problems with it, I know they can easily support us with it. I worked with it over at Saputo, my previous employer working here. The only con I can actually say with the product is sometimes it can be a little on the aggressive side. Sometimes you have to go more on spam patrol and tell it, hey, back off, that's valid email, don't inoculate that. It's actually good traffic. But I don't really see that much bad traffic actually going through, which is the real thing that you're worried about. With Proofpoint, we'll be looking at getting the business edition with it. It has almost everything that you turn around and get in the advanced and the pro edition with it. The only thing that it really doesn't do is online sandboxing. So if you do get an attachment or a link and a person clicks on it, it's not going to sandbox, identify it, and then determine if it's basically good or bad from the sandbox. And then email encryption and social media account protection, that's always been out of scope even under our current project right now. So we don't have sandboxing today, but it's pretty much in alignment with all the features that we're currently getting today with Symantec. Mimecast is the secondary choice for it. There we would be licensing it through CDW. Total cost is $8,995, which is higher than we actually have budgeted for Symantec. Again, that gives us 285 licenses. The biggest problem with Mimecast is they want $1,000 a year for support, and they want $1,400 for implementation costs, where it was only 25 bucks for HBS under our current agreement. They have additional features that you can always turn around, but again, there's overlap. They have threat intelligence. We right now have that through Bitdefender. They have a DMARC analyzer. We got that already through Demartian. They have web security. We're getting that through our brand, through our firewall. We aren't doing any brand exploit protection right now. Security awareness training, that's nice, but there are other providers if we wanted to turn around and get it. They do cloud archiving of email. We're already getting that through the Intradyne at this point. They get email continuity, but it's not as long of a continuity as we actually turn around and get with Proofpoint. It does have a nice Outlook plugin, so you don't have to go anywhere. You open up Outlook and everything that you do is actually done within Outlook. So it's got some good kudos, at least on a good user interface. The problem is it's quite expensive, and the feature set is comparable to Proofpoint, but it's almost at twice the price of what we're looking at turning around and getting with Proofpoint. I'm not going to worry about all that. Email laundry is one of the new kids on the block. It's actually FireEye. FireEye bought them, and FireEye is making some really interesting acquisitions, and they're really going places as a company. I will admit I do invest in them as part of my 401k. They're $6,840 a year. It goes down a little bit more if you turn around and get a 3-year subscription with it. It's 285 licenses for it. They include advanced threat protection with it, which is comparable to what we're getting. Setup and support is included in the price. It has extremely strong phishing and spear phishing analysis. It is doing some things right now that the other big two are not doing. For example, when a company turns around and you have a link inside an email or even the sender, it takes a look and sees where's that domain name coming from, and is that a recently registered domain name, knowing that a lot of ransomware and a lot of malware is being distributed by companies that go and get an email domain name. It might be close to somebody in the company. They keep it for just a couple of days, and then they shut their entire operations down again. If they see that it's a brand new registered domain name, that they turn around and question that traffic a lot deeper than they would with a domain name that has been out there for a considerable period of time. They do some interesting sandbox detonation and whaling protection that is not as deep as some of the other ones. One of the things that's very interesting is their next generation threat protection, which is part of FireEye. They will take a look at the graphics of some of the logos that may actually come into an email. And for example, Microsoft has Microsoft Blue. When you look at their logo and look at their site, there's a very specific color of blue that Microsoft uses again and again and again. And they can tell by the email picture that's inside of it, did this come from Microsoft or not, just based upon the colors of the pictures that are actually showing up in the logo and some of the standard text that they're actually getting. That's a little bit different than what the other people are turning around and doing with their threat protection. It's almost got a little bit of a social engineering aspect to it, of understanding the brandings that's going on inside the companies and their conditional languages, in addition to the DNS. And they only, unfortunately, unlike Proofpoint, giving a 30-day email continuity and spooling, they're turning around and putting a 5-day continuity out there, which is not all that much that they actually have online. As we turn around and look at some of the evaluation, Proofpoint is the most cost value solution that's currently close to what we budgeted. It has the longest online email continuity solution. For a local exchange server, if it was offline, we could turn around and survive for a short period of time running just what they have out there in the cloud. The proof point has HBS to help us with the guided implementation. So it should provide an extremely quick onboarding and switch over from our current solution over to our other one. We do realize that when we move it over, yeah, we can take a dump of all of our email accounts and bring it up onto Proofpoint, but people are going to have to turn around on their personal quarantine lists and recreate it as we go over to the new vendor. Unfortunately, you have to do that practically with every vendor when you migrate from one service over to another. Mimecast provides scanning, quarantine, and analysis directly with Outlook, where no other one does have that level of integration. And FireEye Email Laundry has an extremely interesting phishing, whaling, and bad link detection that goes far beyond just attachment detection. It's fairly cutting eye, but I would actually like to see what this is going to be like within about 3 years from now. It's interesting technology that they have, but it hasn't been proven here in the United States yet. And I think that probably has a significant downside to it, knowing that you don't have enough Fortune 500 companies currently online with it right now here in the US versus somewhere else. Are you going to turn around and run into support issues? So what I'm looking from the committee today is a motion to recommend. There's the text that's actually on the screen. Basically, it would be moving to Proofpoint as a replacement for semantic email security.cloud, realizing, yep, it is a quadrant 1 Gartner. We have looked at this before in the past with HBS. It would turn around and be a fairly simple integration, and we'd like to turn around and actually get this in place before the August 1st election, knowing that, yep, with the upcoming election, potentially still there's going to be a lot of stuff with email. I did not want to turn around and do any form of a conversion of an email service provider during the previous election for obvious reasons. So right now we actually have a small window of time. I don't know what's going to be happening with the Democratic National Convention at this point. So from basically here we are going into May, into July, we're probably going to have to look at turning around and putting on this project list and getting converted. I open it up to the group and the chair.
We have a discussion about the different solutions.
Jim, could you just explain again the cost for the proof point? Is it just a one-time cost? Because the other ones you mentioned, like yearly fees and things like that, how does that work with proof point?
These are all annual. So
Okay.
it's an annual fee. Every single one of them, all three are an annual cost each and every single year. The only one that wasn't annual is if you paid 3 years in advance was actually Email Laundry. But they all are an annual fee because it is a cloud-based service.
Okay.
Dale, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask. You mentioned that it doesn't have encryption capability. Do we encrypt email now?
No, you do not.
Okay, so no
There's
change.
there's no requirement to do it, so no.
Anybody else?
I move to make a motion as recommended.
And I'll second Dale.
Who was the first? I didn't
Greg.
see that.
That was great.
Who was the second? Is that
Dale.
Dale.
Dale? All right, we have a motion and a second. All
We
in
should
favor?
probably, for a lot of the meetings that we've been doing remotely, even the Common Council, we literally go through a roll call of yeas and nays on it. So
Fair enough.
I have to get my list here of everyone who's R. Greg Meyer, Rajiv, John Farney. All right, Chairman Scott Mead.
I get a vote?
Yeah, yay or nay for the motion.
Yay.
Okay.
Yay.
Vice Chair Greg Stroig,
Yay.
Alderman Dan Meyer,
Yay.
Dale Webler,
Yay.
Laura Galusha,
Yay.
Chief Serrano,
Yay.
and John Farney.
Yay.
Okay, the motion is passed. Thank you. Okay, the next is going to be some specific challenges that IT has actually faced. This is not a IT strategy standpoint that will be coming down in the near future on it, but just basically more or less of an overview of some of the things that we have actually encountered here in the city of Franklin from an IT perspective, directly tied to the corona pandemic. We have to admit this is an extraordinary event that has national and regional impacts outside of Franklin. We do have an emergency response plan, and interesting, if you grab the emergency response plan as created by Chief Remington, page 7 actually does outline that, yes, we do have what an occurrence for a disease outbreak or a pandemic outbreak that we'd realize, yes, a disease outbreak has not occurred in the past. We had medium outbreaks of pandemics or communicable viruses that easily could turn around and spread. It has happened in the past, but not on the scale, which made this event particularly noteworthy. It is not a localized event as what we have seen in our current response plan. The emergency response plan is the Franklin emergency response plan, and everything that we've planned accordingly for it has been on a local level. Well, what we're seeing here is definitely a regional, a state, and a national, and a global level of it. Therefore, our plans that we had in place really were not applicable for it. So what does that actually mean? Well, it means you're due to the broadness of the event, roles and responsibilities were not clearly understood because existing plans only partially applied to the whole situation. Decision-making functions, unfortunately, are now distributed between local, county, regional, state, and federal agencies. You're going to turn around and get cross-communication between it. One person may say do X and another person turns around and says turn around and do Y with it. So you may get a lot of mixed messages based upon whose functions and who's speaking at the current moment and who may actually have more knowledge than others on the particular event. The initial danger and threat was not initially known, especially at the early stages, particularly because of bad testing techniques from China and bad data coming from China. Some people say there was even an active misinformation campaign for it. So when the pandemic broke, yeah, there was a lot of improvisation that actually had to be done because there were no plans and the information that we were getting at the time was extremely unclear. There also seemed, especially in governments, to have a definite resistance in calling the coronavirus a pandemic, which would require a state, local, and county-wide response for it. Why? Possibly a political reason. I think it's not to panic the general populace by calling it a pandemic, because that has a very negative connotation to it, and people might suddenly take it in ways beyond just turning around and buying mass quantities of toilet paper, that they just kept on calling it coronavirus, COVID-19, calling it a pandemic. That word or that phrase needed to be said way earlier out the gate than what it actually was, because if they actually use that language, that would have triggered a lot more responses in our emergency response plan than it actually did. Because as you can see, pandemic was actually built in and has some plans that go right along with it. But if they aren't calling a pandemic, then this is just a potential virus outbreak that might be aligned directly to what the flu was. Then there becomes budgetary uncertainties of what funds were unavailable and how to allocate the funds. Because it wasn't called a pandemic early on, funds were slow, both at a regional basis and a national basis of coming out there. And until they actually start legally labeling things specifically to FEMA actions, funds hence aren't made available. I was not told by anyone until about the 10th of March that there were funds available for IT to spend for equipment. And I was told by that from the director of finance, and we were talking a conversation about employment and jobs. And it said, oh, by the way, in a hallway conversation, you have $10,000 to turn around and spend to turn around and get additional computers for COVID instead of anyone needed to be quarantined. There was not a clear follow through in communication between finance and other agencies to department heads, letting them know, yes, funds are available. You can go out there and actually spend some things and get the equipment out there that you so need. There was a huge problem, and it's still here. With open records and meeting laws, it needed clear definition from legal counsel on how to proceed with the requirements for using virtual meetings. Prior to COVID, what we are doing right now with Zoom would not have been allowed. They clearly said if you're going to have a public meeting and the general public is going to have to participate, you have to not only go in correspondence to the statutory requirements of the open records and meetings laws, you have to turn around and actually have that in a public space. And we went round and round and round and round, many different iterations, a lot of phone calls to Jesse. We had resolutions and then redefinition to the resolutions on what we can and cannot do with open records and meeting laws. Streaming became a major event as part of this, something that we've never done before, because we have to make what's going on in the room that people cannot attend to because it may be dangerous to be here. Can they turn around and see the whole event from their house where previously we did not have that functionality? So a lot of this needed a lot of redefinition, not just by our legal counsel. It was going to the League of Municipalities, which Jesse is a chair, but you had all the legal counsels throughout the entire state get together and then determine, all right, amongst themselves, what are they doing, and then try to get some consensus on what should be allowed and what should not be allowed, because the statutory requirements, particularly under emergency action, was becoming more and more and more unclear. I like this rule, this little slide, for the simple fact that I like to pick on the county. Someone makes the rules, another person says the rules apply to me, another person says I break the rules. In COVID, that it's probably been the truth left and right. That one person says, we're going to turn around and use this technology, or we're going to turn around and do it this way, and you're now hurting cats, where people aren't going ahead and following through with what the decision makers suddenly made. A good example of this is the county decided amongst themselves, really asking anyone, we're going to use Microsoft Teams as our communication client for all teleconferencing needs. And anyone that is going to participate in countywide meetings or the ICC meeting has to turn around and use Microsoft Teams. Well, their assumption was everyone was on Office 365. Everyone already had a Microsoft account out there. All they had to do was go over, find people's email addresses and add it to their basically Microsoft Teams sites, and then they would turn around and have access to it. Well, no one asked it. Next thing you know, the mayor and Callie and the police chief get these invites to go to a team meeting. They say, I don't have a Microsoft account. They create a Microsoft account, and then it says, whoa, you can't join this particular meeting because your account already exists. Go please see your administrator. And I was going round and round and round with Microsoft and says, well, they can't do that. They have to, whoever invited you to your team meeting has to take you off their site. You create the account, then they turn around and re-add you to the site now using your new Microsoft account. And my question to them was, well, how do I know who the heck out there in the entire internet suddenly added me to their team site using our ID? Thing is, we don't know. So then it came down to the point where we can't use Teams because we're now locked out of it. We can't get it on. The county locked all of us out here in the entire city from using that product. So we now have to turn around and use something else. So they made the rules and we broke the rules because we can't turn around and get into it. Welcome to
Dale?
COVID.
Dale, you want to say something?
Yes, indeed. So along those lines, are we in violation of the public meeting law right now because we didn't publish the link?
We should have, well, the way we are working, at least Zoom meetings can turn around and be attended to by the participants. So it would be the commission and not the general public in order to prevent Zoom bombing. The link for YouTube should have been published on the meeting agenda. So yes, that was a violation. And also another violation is the phone number for our audio bridge for vast communication. That should also have turned around and been published out as well. So yep, those were, again, it's a learning experience that as we're going through this and we're allowing the technology, the people who actually created the meeting agendas should have posted that at the top of it.
Are we streaming this live anywhere?
Yes, we are. We're streaming it live to YouTube right now.
Okay.
And we would be streaming it live also to Facebook, but I'm having a devil of a time without Callie getting into her Facebook website to turn around and stream over there right now. So we tried it on finance, and I actually was streaming very successfully to her personal page on Facebook, and I wasn't streaming over to the economic development one. I did a great job streaming. Unfortunately, I did it to the completely wrong Facebook site. But she was in there at the meeting, and she turned around and grabbed out her iPad and streamed the finance committee to Facebook using her iPad, and I streamed it using the camcorder over to YouTube. So yeah, we have some growth and learning experiences to get through with some of this. So when I look at, all right, what are we all facing with COVID? If I go back to our wedding cake model again, the bottom of it is core infrastructure. The middle is information management and data management. The top is ERP and your core applications. And sense making and communication is at the absolute top of the wedding cake. And then security is the frosting that goes across all the layers. So if we want to break things down, at least from a strategy viewpoint, to understand how COVID impacted each one of these layers of the wedding cake. What we encountered with core infrastructure problems, we all remember sticky problem of not having enough bandwidth around here and not being on fiber. Well, when City Hall has 100 meg bandwidth and the PD only has 50 megabits of bandwidth, and everyone wants to start working from home and doing virtual meetings, you're going to have a problem. And that immediately hit us right out of the gate. Fortunately, I was able to turn around and make some phone calls. We have a new account manager, Ernest Green, with Spectrum. We've had some outages as part of this, but they did turn around and convert us over to much faster links than what we were getting. So right now at City Hall, we're supposed to be under dual 1 gigabit links. So we have two routers. Both of them are one. One was converted to 1 gig. We're waiting on equipment for the second 1 gig. That's coming. That's under 400. That did increase our monthly run rate for City Hall's internet up by $200. But we did save money in other places because we got special COVID pricing on it. The PD, they've been overpaying for a very long time. They went 50 all the way to 1 gig, and they actually brought their bill down by $45. One can believe that. DPW went from 50 up to 200. They had a $105 increase. Water went from 50 to 400. And they've been crying for more bandwidth for a long time, so they were really happy to get it. That's a $25 decrease. And then FD2 and FD3 went up to 200 at $111 upgrades. We still are on coax at this point, so it's 1 gig coax. We didn't want to change IP addresses. I told them we can't change the router configurations, and we absolutely can't change IP addresses because I'm not going into the firewall and start changing a whole bunch of policies in order to make this happen. I need more bandwidth, but we can't touch the IP addresses. And they were, for the most part, pretty good at that. But it's still on coax at this point. So it's not symmetrical, it's still asymmetrical. So upload speed is significantly slower than download speed. But at least our upload speed is now here at City Hall. I now got 30 to 40 gigabits upload where before I only had 5 on each of the routers. And then there's still no service level agreement. It's still best effort because it is coax. It is on the Charter coax network. It's not on the Spectrum coax network. So it's a little bit newer of a coax network, but they still want to get people off of coax and onto fiber. But at least for the short term, we have a lot more bandwidth than what we actually had before. When we look at information management layer, boy, the election, it hit us and hit us hard. It was the first election ever where email ballots were requested completely and totally over by email. We also had to start early voting. That's where people can come on site. Normally we do that 2 weeks before the election. They saw so many ballot requests coming in via email. They actually did it earlier. So we had a full 3 weeks instead of 2. So we had to get the equipment out there earlier than we expected to allow people to do on-site voting here at City Hall. Over 10,500 ballots were requested by email. Each and every single one of them needed a picture. The email server grew by 75 gigabits, and we had to increase the memory on the email server up to 40 gigabits of memory for it. Fortunately, we just at City Hall did a major memory upgrade to the VMware server, so we were able to account for servers that needed new memory upgrades relatively easily. Over the 4-week period of time, hundreds of messages were received by the clerk's office each and every single day. Every single one of those 10,500 ballot requests needed to be printed out along with a picture. So Sandy had a dedicated printer put in her office just to turn around and keep up with the massive load that they were having of just printing and then responding to the people saying, yep, your ballot has been, requests have been received and we're putting it out in the mail. We did have an email outage on the 15th of March. That was due to the police department sending a massively large training presentations to some employees between the Detective Bureau. We previously did not internally have any restrictions on sending email messages of a particular size. I've been fighting that ever since I got here. But it's a note, we have to turn around and be able to do this. We have to be able to send evidence back and forth between the Department of Justice. There's always a litany of reasons why email, even though Semantic has a 50 meg limit going out to the internet, at least internally, it was always allowed to be unlimited. Well, we now have that restricted down to a 20 megabit size. What they wound up doing is corrupting the transport queue inside the Exchange server's SMTP service. That had to be, the server had to be brought down, the transport queue deleted, recreated, and then brought back up again. For 2 days, we were having a lot of delays where we would get an email and someone would respond back to it, and they would get a response back before 45 minutes later because of that corrupt transport queue caused by this stuck huge email message, several gigs in size that was just sitting there. So we put the restriction on there, and that hopefully won't happen again for the future elections. We also had to temporarily turn off our image filtering rules that we use on our spam filter because that was causing some of the photo IDs going with the ballot request to immediately go into quarantine. And then there was a huge questions of how do you turn around and print over 10,000, I think it was close to 12,000 ballots was eventually received via mail-in. And how do you turn around and take 12,000 ballots and print all the envelopes for it? The envelopes don't fit in a traditional copier. You can only put 15 envelopes into the bypass tray on a copier, and none of the copiers had a specialized tray. One would think the larger copiers would have an envelope tray. Nope, they don't sell that over at Toshiba. You can get it for huge paper to turn around and create large diagrams with, but they don't have envelope trays for photocopiers. For the simple fact that they request that, well, if you're going to be doing something like that, you really should be getting equipment for a print shop operation, and a photocopier like this is not intended to be a print shop operation. So we had a lot of problems printing out envelopes and mailing labels. And then also, how do you take the ballot, fold it, stuff it, and put it inside the envelope so you can turn around and mail it, realizing you have the ballot with the ballot, the envelope that they return it in, and then there's the shipping envelope. So there's 2 envelopes that actually have to be printed for each and every single ballot that's out there. So as soon as they started, let's turn around and use email for all the elections. Folks, there's some big technology considerations on how operationally you would actually go ahead and do all of that. They did it by bulk manpower at this point, but we realize that if we have to do another major email campaign in the future, we're going to have to turn around and get equipment, most likely a mimeograph machine, or either that borrow it from the school system to turn around and print the return envelopes and all the stuff that necessary on the envelopes and do it in bulk, because labels and photocopiers and this and printers just don't work. ERP and core applications, naturally, a lot of people are going to need to have remote access. A lot of people were initially told that they had to be on site. This was later revised as COVID came along. We began to understand more about it, that it was then allowed to each departmental manager, if they wanted to turn around and allow some or all of their departments to turn around and work from home. The initial request is everyone who is a City of Franklin worker had to turn around and show up each and every single day to City Hall. No one can work from home unless you have COVID itself, the coronavirus, then you can turn around and stay home and have to quarantine. But unless you're sick, no, you have to come to work. Eventually they turned around and changed it. That was a delay in decision-making, which led to, all right, how are we now going to turn around and give remote access to all of our employees? I know there's a lot of companies out there that ran smack into this. But we had $10,000 allocated for the purchase of a new emergency laptops for it. And we actually found a really nice Lenovo AMD Ryzen. I'm keeping my eye on the Ryzen chips. They are really sweet. I've been amazingly impressed by it. That little Ryzen thing is taking on a full desktop processor on it. And it also has a much better graphics chip on it than Intel Iris has. It steals 2 meg of memory from your from the motherboard. So here we had a laptop that actually came with 2 gigs of RAM. So 10 is available to the application of the operating system. 2 is available for graphics. But that little AMD Ryzen, it was $529, and boy, was it a steal for the price in it. So it's something that was a low cost, but really good choice piece of hardware of use for the money. Because we did find such a good price on it, we were able to buy 14 laptops for the amount of money that we actually had for it, knowing that we had to include hardware, accessories, and licensing costs for it. The problem is the slow kickstart that everyone else is seeing out there. You go out there, try to buy a webcam, there are no webcams. Try to go buy a headset, there's no headset. Try buy a computer, there's no computers out there. There's no inventory, they're all gone. So we were able to get these late, but then some of them we got 4 of them, and then the rest of them UPS didn't deliver because they were lost in shipment. They got stolen off the UPS truck. So then they had to turn around and reorder them again. And then finally we had our full inventory of laptops at the first week of even going with this AMD option. We got all of our laptops at the beginning of April. And we were told by Dell if we were going to turn around and have a custom built laptop, starting at the 13th, they said it was going to be about a month, just a little less than a month to turn around and get a custom built laptop at the earliest. So here you have COVID, you need equipment, it's 30 days to get it. Everyone was having problems turning around and trying to get equipment just to allow people from working from home. That was plan A, following security procedures and letting people only connect home via the VPN. Well, realizing, all right, people are now working from home without the VPN. We're going to have to let people turn around and put the VPN client on their home computer because we just don't have enough computers to go around. When you don't have enough computers to go around, the only thing you can do is to put it on the employee's personally owned equipment and to do it safely. So it was decided by me that instead of turning around and opening up our terminal services to the internet and allowing them to turn around and connect through a gateway, which would then allow a hacker to turn around and try to attack our Active Directory infrastructure, what would be better is to have the employee put the VPN client on their home computer, so at least they're coming in via an IPsec tunnel, and then anything that's communicating to it, I at least know it's a City of Franklin employee trying to communicate to it versus someone turning around and trying to hack it to it from the internet. So employees were given instructions on how to use Outlook Web Access, also how to turn around and put the Outlook mobile client on their home phone. We did spin up, even prior to COVID, a new Windows 2016 terminal server, and that was all ready to go. So when they installed the VPN client, we didn't install any software on their own home machine. They had to then only turn around and make a connection via a website to turn around and access an internal Windows 2016 terminal server and then run all of their applications thin. That way, that would eliminate exactly how many servers and such they are actually turning around and talking to. And that's actually seeming to work pretty well. There's not a lot of departments that's turned around and did it. It's primarily been down in engineering and planning that I think has been the greatest consumer, but it actually has worked well and has gotten over us the hump of what we had to deal with the hardware procurements. WRDS was in itself a huge success. So instead of turning around and publishing out a desktop, we just publish out individual applications for them. We did have some initial problems with group policy and drives mapping, but we were able to turn around and get that fixed through some creative login script. It's all secured by global groups. So based on your global group membership and what department in, that'll determine what applications you'll turn around and see. The applications don't have to be installed or run locally on their own machine. And it also works because it is running thin, great in a low bandwidth situation, just like Citrix does. This is poor-man Citrix. Govern was published out to all departments, and we've been putting that on the terminal server in the past for the water department because of low bandwidth situations between City Hall and water. So we knew that was actually going to work, and Harris also supported it. And really amazing, most of the time when you run into thin applications, it's printing that you always wind up stumbling over. And the Windows 2016 terminal server universal driver really has not given us any problems. No one, knock on wood, has been reporting any problems printing to their home printer using universal driver redirection. At the top is communication. PD and FD, fire department and PD dispatch for interagency notification of available COVID vehicles. We actually have a specialized web portal. One is actually being published out, they call it MABAS, and that is being published out by Greenfield. And then the city of Milwaukee, they're not on Phoenix, they're on their own CAD and RMS entirely. So they had to turn around and create their own CAD portal. And we immediately had to give access over to the PD and the FD, access to Greenfield's CAD portal, City of Milwaukee's CAD portal, in addition to the Greenfield CAD portal that they already had. They also had to redo some naming of what they did with the vehicles. So there are 4 ambulances right now that are dedicated of COVID and COVID only, and that will dispatch to anywhere in the Milwaukee area. Yes, we can have a Franklin ambulance dedicated for COVID going all the way up to Brown Deer to turn around and transport someone over to the hospital. And that does happen with it. But the biggest thing is knowing what vehicles are in-house and what vehicles are out of house. And we had to turn around and make significant changes and give access to both of those portals to allow them access to that information. Anytime that you have people working from home, you're going to have stuff with phones. Just like with AV, phones, all I've been dealing with phones. So now a person works from home. All right, how do we get our phones off of night mode? How do we change the hunt groups? How do we change the pick groups? We bought a feature called EC500 that will allow your phone when it's a great feature for Avaya. When it's enabled, it will allow any phone call that you receive automatically to be immediately dual routed over to your cell phone. So as your phone rings inside the office, you can pick it up and take it from your cell phone. The person doesn't even know, think they're talking to you and you're sitting at City Home, but next thing you know, you're actually working in your own home office. And then a lot of people, how do I turn around and get to my voicemail accounts and such remotely from home? So just a plethora, auto attendance as well, just a plethora of different types of phone and phone configuration changes IT had to make on the fly. With open meetings, obviously we have changes to AV and teleconferencing. We had an audio bridge provider, Vast Communications. It was really good. We started it up about a year ago when Jesse wanted for the League of Municipal constituents to turn around and be able to have a meeting remotely. He wanted up to 250 people. The Vast Audio Bridge, it's a cloud-based service. You just dial into a Polycom, which we had to buy Polycom Starfish conference phones, but you dial into the Polycom, everyone else can dial into it. All you need is a telephone. Prior to COVID, I hate to say this, our conference rooms are stuck in the 1950s. The city has done no audio bridging whatsoever. Again, cultural, we had to kind of teach people how to facilitate a meeting and work with audio bridges, understanding, yep, you have to give time for people that aren't there on the audio bridge to turn around and participate with it. But the Vast Audio Bridge was really good. We actually used it for both county meetings and ECC meetings. They did not have an audio bridge that could support 40 to 50 people. So they actually turned around and used ours for a period of time. Like I said, all the conference rooms, there was only one that had audio-visual equipment. We purchased a Polycom studio, X50 studio video conferencing unit for a Zoom room and hooked that up over to the TV. So we now actually have one room that you have online video conferencing directly in the room. And then we also had to buy Zoom licenses. We bought 20 of them and handed them judiciously out to people, I being one, so we can then turn around and actually use Zoom teleconferencing services and then letting people know this is how you are supposed to be using the tool and this is how you turn around and protect yourself so you aren't suddenly Zoom bombed in the middle of the application. And then social media, one of the things we have to really be careful of is people turning around and creating social media sites because they want to, thinking, gee, I'm in a pandemic situation. I'm just going to turn around and create this because I have the authority to create a social media site. And it's like, no, you do not. There are specific guidelines that we have given forward that if you're going to create a social media site, you need to have a communication plan, and you also have to have a plan in place on how you're going to control that meeting and control the audience and make sure that you have full administration of that particular site. One area that was allowed to turn around and do it was the health department, because they needed to get COVID information immediately out to the constituents as quickly as they can. Social media was the best platform for it. So I gave the information to Courtney Day, the director of the health department. She actually filled out all the paperwork on it and had plans in place and really thought about it and sent it back. And she was actually very thankful to go through that process. It did make sure that the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed on it. So there are 2 new Facebook sites for the health department that have been authorized out there that we turn around and did use for COVID purposes. As just talked about the interagency communications, you had the MOBAS portals. There is the county TELUS system out there. It's still read-only at this point. The TELUS system is supposed to be a county-wide CAD system, and it also tells you who's being dispatched for what period for what calls. This is going to get a lot more attention. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because this is really the county's solution for it. They've invested in it. Unfortunately, everyone has to upgrade to Phoenix 2020 in order to make this happen and be in place. This would have just been a godsend if we would have had this tool as part of the COVID incident response plan out there at a countywide level. Unfortunately, because the requirement of a major upgrade to the Phoenix RMS for each PD, it didn't happen. I see them probably putting on more political pressure to turn around and actually make this happen. Because if there are additional COVID outbreaks in the future, yes, this tool really should be the one that we're using instead of these homegrown tools, home-coded tools being created by Greenfield and Milwaukee. No, everyone really should be on the exact same platform, and that would be TELUS throughout the entire Milwaukee County area. And the fire departments are seeing huge benefits of interagency cooperation and resource sharing on it. And because of that, because of all of that benefit that's being derived on it, I see them strongly championing moving forward on the TELUS project as well. So my prediction is we'll probably be seeing a lot of pressure being placed on the PD to actually somehow find financing and time and resources to actually make the Phoenix 2020 upgrade actually happen. Even though there are a lot of questions of, is Phoenix 2020 really ready for prime time? This is the MobAS portal, in case if you've never seen it before. Very simple. This was actually written by Dennis McDonald, who used to be the IT manager here once upon a time. He wrote this site, just a bunch of jelly beans that basically tell you, all right, yellow means it's unavailable, or it's not, it's there, it's in-house, but it's not available for scheduling. Green means that it's scheduled, and red means that it's currently out of bay. And this is basically the same thing that we turn around and get from the Milwaukee County portal as well. And this is coming from their proprietary RMS system, which begins with an E. I can't remember it anymore. Via PBX phone changes, I had to act as the phone engineer under this because there was no one else to turn around and get it to. EC500 was a big success in that, and it was a nice feature that we purchased that had a lot of value. Department hunt groups and pickup groups had to be changed, especially the day buttons. Auto attendants, I have two still that we need to create for the library and the court, particularly the library, before they turn around and open it up. An auto attendant is those automated messages when you welcome to US Bank. If you want to talk to a teller, please hit 1. If you want to get your account balance, please hit 2, etc. That we want to set that up where it can give people some verbiage of what's going on at the library, what's the hours of operation, and then allow them to transfer, possibly transferring differently depending if it's morning or at night. And then a lot of education on training and voicemail. And then Centrix lines, I actually have that as an operations issue that I'll talk about later. AT conferencing, again, a lot of our conference rooms were stuck in the 1950s. Tables, chairs, that was pretty much about it. So 6 Polycoms were ordered. We ordered them refurbished units. Haven't had any problems with them. Bought them at a very good price before everyone else started buying them. There were a lot of legal issues with using telecom. We do have now a vast audio conference bridge service that is now a paid service for the entire year. So we paid $192 for it, and that's now unlimited audio conferencing for the entire year. The Common Console sound system, we need to turn around and look at how we're going to tie into our existing microphone system. We have to do social distancing, particularly for the elections. They were using the hearing room, which was the overflow room. They never turn around and put anything into the community room. So we had to try to figure out a hodgepodge system to get it in there, but it would be nice to extend our microphone system not only into the hearing room it is today, but also extend it over into the community room as well. Live streaming on social media was needed in order to broadcast messages out when people couldn't turn around and be attended. And then, yeah, how do you turn around and actually use Zoom for each of the departmental meetings? And then how do you turn around and use it for larger meetings that we are dealing with right now for committees? this being the very first one that we're using here for a commission and committee meeting, using it via Zoom. We talked about teleconferencing. And then we talked about social media. And that's what we have. Any questions on any of the things that we've kind of encountered along the way with what we've had to deal with some COVID, or even other people's experiences with it?
Gee, Jim, doesn't sound like you've been doing much.
They're coming to take me away.
Hey, hey.
I think you hit on some of the things that a lot of businesses and organizations have been hitting, right? VPN bandwidth capacity. I think, this was a very good overview. Do we have like a list of recommendations, Jim, that we can look for future funding? Some of these things to correct more long term. I mean,
there's
kind
actually
of scramble mode, to try and get this done quickly.
Yep, there some very good articles being propagated out there about IT and IT strategy items that we should be looking for with COVID. Obviously, the need for VPN, load balancing, bandwidth, running a lot more thin applications throughout it. And I would like to, when we start the IT strategy meeting, I'd like to kind of like fold some of that in to our IT strategy outlook for it, because I think I don't want to be short-sighted on this. I think these are good ideas, but yet some of these ideas, not only do we need to address for the here and now, we need to address it for the long term as well. So yes, I will be creating that list. IT strategy obviously is an upcoming agenda item again for discussion. I also have Callie who would like to turn around and have an earlier, and we'll address this towards the end of the meeting. She would like to have a discussion on what I keep on calling it social development, economic development. Social development's a bar. Economic Development Commission is wanting to turn around and doing some marketing, and that's been outsourced to a third-party company to help them turn around and create some videos and some marketing campaign material that they want to turn around and put on the City of Franklin website, and then potentially also on the social media website as well. So, well, the Technology Commission is definitely going to want to see that. She does have the Tourism Commission underneath her wing on it. There is a budget for the Tourism Commission that we might actually be able to dip into, where there are some things like, gee, we'd love to get a photographer to get out there so we can finally change the picture off of our main website, that we know we need more pictures out there. We need to handle the videos better out there. I absolutely need a city Facebook page that isn't rabid at this point, that we can turn around and put all the city videos to, because right now all the live streams are going to the Social Development Commission page, because that's really the only one we're in control of right now. And that's probably not the best place to turn around and be putting it, is on the Economic Development Commission site. That we do know there are some elements for what's known as phase 2 of the website refresh project. I'd like to hold that for the next meeting on it, and then extend that conversation out to what Callie is also looking at trying to do with branding and marketing, and what they're wanting to do with tourism, realizing that we may be able to take the $20,000 that we have for phase 2 in capital, and maybe align it with some of the funds that she has for tourism.
Okay.
Any other questions on the COVID? And
Any other discussion?
No, I just seriously thank you for all of your work. I know it's different
Here.
for everybody, but we can imagine how this would be with a staff of the size of yours, which is not much, and you doing a lot of this yourself. So thank you.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, nice job, Jim. We had
Yeah,
a,
yeah.
a number of those same problems at school. We were fortunate in that we had a number of people in our parish office who already had remote access to a lot of their resources. So we got by that pretty quickly. We tried to get a VPN working in short order, and there were just too many different things to overcome in order to get the VPN working. We only had really one person using a Mac who needed the VPN anyway, but we got around that using a different method than a VPN. But yeah, a great job. You did quite a bit over an extended range of devices and software to get it all working.
And it isn't over yet either. I mean,
Exactly.
we may see a resurgence of this too. So it ain't over to the fat ladies things. The other big thing that most people aren't talking about that was talked about at the finance committee is how COVID is going to actually have a major impact on revenues. There was a discussion item at the last Common Council meeting. If you haven't had a chance to go to YouTube and see what we had, immediately create a YouTube channel, a better one, for a branded one for the city of Franklin. That's another thing we had to do, is create YouTube channels to place the streamed videos onto and figure out how to live stream. But the Common Council meeting had a very interesting point where we thought for sure that we would be getting a lot more money this year for tipping fees for all the landfills. And because of changes by the vendor, one, they were sending stuff over to Menominee Falls, but they're also seeing a large reduction in trash pickup. Without restaurants, you're not going to have a lot of trash out there. So they're seeing a large decrease in trash. We budgeted for a X amount of dollars of expected tipping fees and landfill revenues from it that suddenly didn't materialize off of it. Well, needless to say, they thought there was going to be a $500,000 shortfall in the budget because of the tipping fees. And then, all right, projects are now going to have to get put on hold. Approved capital projects, all right, do we repave this parking lot? Do we turn around and buy more parks and lands we were planning on doing? Do we turn around and take certain street repairs and defer them? Do we turn around and do like the 50th Street Marquette project? Do we defer that? None of them were good options, but when you didn't have the money, you didn't have the money. I am pleased to say that they found, yes, there is some money in MMSD grant that once we apply for it, we're owed some money by the MMSD to about over $900,000. That once we get the paperwork in and submitted, we should be getting a refund for these grants for it. That was not planned in the revenue. So fortunately, we had some manna fall out from heaven. And suddenly MMSD is supposed to give us a bunch of money that's going to fix that budget shortfall. But when you're looking at double-digit unemployment, potentially all the way up to 20%, and we're not quite sure that this is going to be a V recovery, it could very well be houndstooth, just like it was in the Great Depression. You have a downturn, then it goes up for a little bit, and then something happens and slams down. And in the Great Depression, it was a banking failure. What happens if we have the mortgage crisis problem that we suddenly saw materialize in 2008? And then we suddenly have a bunch of huge problems within the credit markets going with it. Now you have stagflation going on at this point. Is that going to dramatically impact the city's revenues and how we're going to turn around and be able to operate? That was discussed at length at the Finance Commission meeting. That video is out there right now on YouTube. It was very interesting conversation. I am pleased to announce that we are in very decent shape at this point. Even with the stressors of high unemployment being out there right now, the city is in very remarkable shape compared to a lot of places around the United States. 70% of our revenue does come from the tax base, from high property taxes. And a lot of people complain, property taxes are so high. The property taxes, yeah, they are high, but it's a solid guaranteed tax base. And if a person doesn't pay the property taxes, we still get paid back from it from the county. So immediately 70% of the revenue taken in by the city is already accounted for. It would be anything in planned economic development, tipping fees, festivals, permits, licenses, extra economic development. That's the 30% that we might suddenly see go down at this point. Thus far, we don't see any stressors where that might possibly be a problem. But in other communities, if you look at Florida, where all of their money, they don't have income taxes, it's all on state taxes and it's all on tourism. And they're gonna be hurting really, really, really bad. Places that aren't like Franklin and that has the guaranteed tax base with the income tax, with property taxes coming in. And I have been doing so much based on variable tax revenue. Yeah, they're going to be very, very, very stressed. And who knows if the state government would turn around and be stressed by it.
The same is true in Las Vegas, where a lot of their income is casino based. And of course, all of that's closed up. So all of their revenue is gone. My two sisters live there, and they're pushing. And it's one of the reasons why they're pushing very, very hard to get everybody back to work and rolling the dice on the safety aspect.
And you can't count on the city for services when the city doesn't have any money. Their only choice at that point is to go out there and borrow it. So I am pleased to say at this point, IT in the revenue stream, and there's nothing that I've been told that I have to cut thus far in the budgets for spending. I am being very cautious on what we're spending. I'm approaching this at a depression level area of spending. I'm not spending things right now unless I absolutely positively have to. Yeah. And then I will do my spending towards the second half of the year once things become a little bit more known at this point. But right now I'm sitting on my hand with a lot of spending that I could be doing. Plus, who the heck has the time to take on projects when you're doing all this?
All right. All right, great job, Jim.
Okay, next agenda item?
Technical issues review.
Okay. This gets kind of interesting. We have some fiber proposals out there. The city is currently researching the possibility of using fiber connections for the main offices. We've discussed this at length in the past, primarily the city hall and the police department. Using legacy coax networks that have slower upload speeds and have no SLAs. So fiber, you get an SLA with it. In spite of recent bandwidth upgrades, both AT&T, Spectrum Charter have been doing a sufficient job of maintaining bandwidth, but they have not been a sufficient job of maintaining their legacy networks, where constant periods of outages are being encountered due to the network grids being overutilized. Anyone who has studied pandemics in the past realizes just the power grids and the communication grids are the first things to get pulverized as complete and total work patterns change throughout the entire United States. Network stability at Fire Station 3 continues to be a problem. Although more expensive fiber networks have been envisioned as the bandwidth solution eventually for the city, and it is within our strategic outlook. Synergy is working on several proposals for fiber access to the main facilities that will provide bandwidth from 200 megabits to 100 up to 1 gigabit. Everstream is a new fiber network provider for business, non-residential, so business and industrial, and is making serious inroads within the Franklin area, and who are providing service in several major customers in the Franklin Industrial Park area. Everstream is working with the engineering and economic development departments in the installation of conduit in newly planned development areas, where fiber can then be added to the location very quickly by just putting it through the conduit, so they've already pre-laid. The vendor is creating a proposal to install new fiber for government access at a cost of approximately $231,000, which includes fiber going to the PD and the high school for access to the school district's video cameras. The vendor is offering a 36-month contract with no payments for the first 5 months, moving the payment schedule back by 5 months. If accepted, the fiber can be installed into the city by October. This will be a managed fiber solution where the vendor is responsible for all communications, routing, fiber cuts, and installation work. The city would then be paying a monthly fee to turn around and access that particular managed fiber. Many surrounding municipalities have opted to install their own privately owned fiber or lease dark fiber instead, which requires specialized IT staff with significant networking experience to maintain the government fiber grid. Since the Franklin IT does not have this foundation of internal experience, looking at a managed solution makes sense. Once the proposal has been finalized, it will be brought to the Technology Commission for review. Two items to note with that is one, yep, we have a new player beyond AT&T and Time Warner Cable that is in the area. They're coming in the area like a team of wild streaming horses. In my conversations with Synergy, they didn't know of Everstream. We introduced them to Everstream, who was knocking on our door with economic development. And they have now worked directly with the vendor on at least 5 to 6 new customers who've really liked them as a service provider, and have been doing a really good job of actually providing very low latency, high bandwidth. They start at 500 megs. They don't go any lower than that. So it'd be 500 megs. Typically it's 1 gig fiber, and bringing it into the area business. They are now in direct competition with AT&T and Spectrum finally in the new industrial park areas. And now they're beginning to put it out into some of the TIF district areas, laying conduit. So if they want to put fiber in there and becomes economically viable to put fiber in there, the concept is if they build it, they will come. If they know that fiber, just like water and sewer and roads are available, that suddenly makes the site far more attractive for economic development for it. So hopefully this will be a new relationship and a good relationship. Again, government and private business, they don't work hand in hand, that buddy with one another on it. But there's nothing wrong to say that you can't work on an economic development proposals of what type of conduit would you put in there if you would so choose to lay your fiber in there down at a later point. But all the stuff that's going on Ryan, I know it goes they have fiber available all the way up to just before the DPW. And then they're looking at putting in additional fiber from DPW all the way over to TID 6 at this point. So that's a completely and totally new development that just happened over the last couple of months. Centrix, AT&T, old Centrix lines. AT&T Centrix lines have a contract renewal date of 4/30, so it's rapidly coming up. We most likely will sign the contract, but see if we can write it with an escape clause to say we have the option to cancel it anytime throughout the year. The amount of recent outage being incurred by AT&T for legacy copper phone services has been considerable. The outage makes Centric phone services very unattractive. Over the past 3 weeks, the DPW has encountered 5 major phone service outages where Centrix lines were either fully down with no dial tone, or the amount of phone static and crackling was so significant as to make conversation nearly impossible. Kevin Schlueter, the DPW supervisor, is begging for an alternative solution for the standard phones that they have out there right now that lately have about a 50% availability rate. Which comes on to question, why renew your AT&T Centrix contract if the service that they're providing them, which isn't under SLA, is so incredibly bad? Synergy is working on a proposal with Mitel to convert all 35 to 38 phones at FD2, FD3, DPW, and Water over to voice over IP managed phones from a cloud PBX. This has the advantage of permanently retiring the on-site PBXs, no longer covered under warranty or supported by vendors, in addition to eliminating the need for legacy bell wiring at each site. Voice over IP solution would run under Cat5 cabling over the Spectrum IP links. Note, this does bring Spectrum reliability back into the equation. This would be a quick and turnkey solution where the vendor builds the phones, the button setups, the hunt groups, call pass, auto attendance, routing, etc., and then drop ships the leased IP phones. DIDs would then be ported over to Mitel, and the AT&T Centric contract would then be canceled for that site. Alternatively, the city could apply via voice over IP phones to the site and manage the call setup and routing completely by IT. DIDs would be pointed over to the City Hall T1s. The downside in doing this with this project is internally is the length of time it would take to set up the equipment and having IT do the PBX changes. In addition to the fact that if all AT&T legacy T1s went down, this would now impact multiple offices instead of just City Hall. The eventual migration to fiber SIP lines may be an option, but unfortunately, Mark Liberta did sign a 5-year contract with AT&T for our T1s, so we can't look at that for until about another 4 years. And last but not least, City of Tourism site changes. Callie Berg would like to spend some time with the Technology Committee discussing a planned website marketing and tourism commission changes to both the Franklin website and potentially moving some of the marketing and branding to a dedicated social media site. The city has $20,000 in available capital for 2020 changes to the website as part of phase 2 changes. With the proposed changes and requests by the Economic Development Commission, tourism funding may be possible. One optional date she did put out there was, I believe she wanted to see if anyone was available either on my guess is on the 13th or the 20th of May, where we would actually just move the May Technology Commission up about 2 weeks from its normal scheduled time. Does anyone know right off the bat that doing so would be not a good idea and they wouldn't be able to attend if that was the case?
What were those dates again, Jim?
She would prefer May 13th, which would be a Wednesday the 13th,
Wednesday, yeah.
or Wednesday the 20th. I believe our next one's supposed to be the 27th. So the 13th or the 20th.
The 13th is fine with me.
Yep, good for me. Kind of stuck at home.
I wish.
Jim, this will still be virtual?
It'll still be virtual, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the 13th is fine with me as well.
Okay.
Let's float the 13th, Jim. Yeah.
All right. I will have Lisa pull out the group, get an official tally on that. And if we have quorum, then we'll turn around and actually schedule the next Technology Commission meeting for the 13th. And then we can
All right, we
move
up
on
to director's report.
Yep, director's report. Disk space on the 3 Parsan is beginning to become an issue. This was particularly true of the Exchange server where mail store disks needed to be increased due to the massive influx of emails received because of the recent election. I'm currently working with PDS and going through some of the growth concerns. The new Exchange 2016 or 2019, if we opt for that version, project has to move forward prior to the November election because yes, we're running off of disk space, but then it also makes sense to put 2 Exchange servers in place instead of running the entire city on 1 Exchange server. A new SQL server also needs to be provisioned and put in place for the new BSNA project that we're moving forward with the water department and hopefully also with the new ERP replacement as well. And then the GIS server is also going to need to replace, and that will also need to have additional disk space as well. The first goal is to reallocate any disk space that we already have that may need to be reappropriated more judiciously than we currently are. And then last but not least, we may have to turn around and install additional disks if necessary. And that would be at City Hall. And then last but not least, a new panic alarm controller has been installed at the public library. Initial testing had limited success. This changed a little bit this afternoon. Although the alarm was received by the PD dispatch for the library, they are not getting any audio with the system. At least the alarm is up and working. Baycom is currently working on both the library and PD dispatch. That did change this afternoon. They did fix the volume alarm over at the PD. Unfortunately, they turned around and tested City Hall. They noticed that some controllers were down again. So I'm going over to Bob in facilities and wondering why is the City Hall a panic alarm's not working? So this is why we do tests more than anything else. But at least I can say the library has now officially been fixed. All of the panic buttons are now working over at the library. They haven't had that in over a year.
Okay. Anything else, Jim?
That would be it. That is it.
All right, moving right along to item 8, future agenda items. Looks like we got 3. City of Franklin website phase. Is that what Callie Berg wanted to talk
Yep,
about?
B and C are going to be scheduled for next month, and the month after that is where I'll be spinning back on the strategic technology plan. I might be able to do all 3 in one site, but I think it'll be an awful long meeting if I turn around and did that.
Yep. All right, sounds good. Any other future agenda items that we wanted to bring up?
Jim needs a vacation.
Jim needs a vacation. All right. All right, so we had talked about the next meeting date and time being the 13th.
At 6 o'clock, that was right.
6 o'clock, yes.
Okay.
Same bat channel.
Zoomed and live streamed.
All right, we are at adjournment. We have a
Okay,
motion
it
to adjourn?
is 7:31.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion
Second.
to move to adjourn. Dale, second. All in favor? We gotta do the roll call, Jim?
I'd say that's probably good enough.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank
Okay.
you all.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Jim.
Good night.
Care.
All right, good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Look at the social media sites and like us. We'd like to have as many subscribers as we can.
I will definitely like and subscribe.
Okay, thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.